Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Shine Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Shine Hills at shinehills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
We are across the street and around the world. Shine Hills.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Nathan, welcome back.
So good to see you.
We are way overdue. It's
I know.
You've been running different. We've all been running different directions, and I rallied the troops, or rallied our gathering today, so that you could talk about something that I think is extremely important in our community.
Wonderful.
In this library policy, and I told the church last week. I said I'm going to get the goods on this. I'm going to get the guy that knows everything. So I spoke you up really big.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah. But I know, we've talked a little bit off air just about this policy, and I agree with this policy.
Yeah.
But some of the feedback I've heard from some is that, well, it's not enough. And that's what you always hear, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you've been in the politics for a long time, and you always hear, well, it's not the perfect thing. It's like, yeah, but this is really, really good and a really good direction, in my opinion. Yeah. And let you weigh in on that.
I fully agree with that assessment. And that's part of the challenge. When you deal as a Christian in a fallen world, oftentimes you're not going to get everything that you want. Right. But the thing is to try to figure out how to get what you can accomplish to protect as many people as possible. Right. And so I think that there's been a lot of work done, and I'm appreciative.
Now, what I want to do is kind of tell people what I think I know, and then you fix anything that I might be off on.
Good.
This. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this policy, it came from the school board, and I don't know, it's right now. So we're in October right now. I think they're voting on it in November. And they're waiting for public feedback, public comment, I think, and some support or whatever. But this is the proposal is that instead of what's historically been done for the last hunk of time, I don't know how long, is an opt-out policy. In other words, if there was a library book that you or your family didn't care for or whatever, you'd have to opt your child out of that particular book. That's the way I understand it.
Right.
Now, what they've done is said, okay, well, why don't we do something different? Why don't we have an opt-in policy? In other words, if a parent has to choose, and there's 4 different ways you can opt in. And I can run through those real quick. You can opt in to say no access to materials containing any sexually explicit material, so no access. Another way you can opt in to say is the parent and guardian limited access. Number 3 is open access. In other words, my kid can check out any book. And then number 4 would be no access. My kid cannot check out any book. Right. So the opt-in here's the thing I like about it. It gives the power into the hands of the parent.
Agreed.
And that's what, when we were interviewing school board members, we interviewed anybody that wanted to. Remember that?
And this was a big issue.
It was. And I remember you asking this very question about, where does who do we serve?
Absolutely.
And you really made, there were several that made a good case for, we've got to have parental involvement. Right. And those that kind of believe that, well, this board does now. Yes. It's this power has shifted. I am too. Yeah. I am just amazed. And one of the things I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it a couple more times because I'm a preacher. I can do that. I can say things 3 or 4 times and finally drive that home. I want people to stand with our school board members. Yeah. Because they need our support. We elect them and then basically go out there and say, well, good luck, have courage, stand strong. Well, we need to come along and say, hey, I see what you're doing. I'm with you. Right. And that means a lot. Right. It means a lot to me. I mean, I have a strong stance for Israel, and I always appreciate when someone comes along and say, "Hey, I'm with you, man. Thanks for saying something." Right. Those mean a lot, even though it wouldn't change my mind, but it does kind of boister that courage that you got somebody standing there. So I think that's really one of the whys that we're doing this today. I want people to understand what this is, and then stand with our. If you agree with it, make your stand.
May I pitch in on that very issue?
Go for it.
Just today, I talked to one of those school board members, and they were talking about how there's a lot going on, and it's really good to hear from from people who are supportive of these measures.
Right.
And I said, well, just know this. This is something that the entire community is watching. Okay. And you may hear from some of the radical left people quite a lot on issues like this because this is their stand-in for religion oftentimes.
Oh, yeah.
But the vast majority of people in this community and across the nation lean in favor of empowering parents, knowing that parents are the ones that are responsible for their children.
Absolutely.
So I think it just doubles down on your point. We need to let them know that we're behind them.
So I think one of the reasons that, I would think that everybody would say, sure, give the power to the parents. But there's a whole group of people that don't want that.
Exactly.
They want the power to the state. Is that who has the power?
In essence, yes. Yeah, and this goes all the way back to John Dewey, who wanted to empower essentially state educators. Yeah. Remember, government employees, empower government employees and give them more responsibility over your children than the people who actually birthed them and brought them into the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So, and just to be clear, I want everybody to get this. We're not talking about curriculum in classrooms.
Right.
We're not talking about other content. We're not even talking about health class or anything. Mm-hmm. These are library books.
Right.
That are, you have to determine whether you opt in or or they're going to keep the policy, which is an opt-out policy, or do we adopt this new policy, which is an opt-in policy with 4 different options?
That's right.
And one of those options is say, hey, my kid can have all access. Well, that's an option.
That is an option.
But at least the parent has made that decision.
Right.
Right. I think this is. I think it's brilliant on a couple of levels, and this is where I really want you to weigh in on, because I think anytime you hear the word. If you take books and you cherry pick, I don't want this book or that, you get the word book banning gets thrown out there. But that word sounds benign, but there's some legislative power behind that, right?
Right.
You can be sued for book banning kind of thing.
Right. If it was genuine book banning.
Okay, but for this, tell me.
I really appreciate. So, Galen, when we talk about a real book ban, people use that term to try to elicit a certain image. We know of that from the 1930s with the Nazis and book bannings. There's famous footage of tens of thousands of Nazi youths with books throwing them into massive bonfires.
Right.
Interestingly enough, those kids were doing that not at the behest of Hitler, but at the behest of a number of college students that were trying to figure out what they thought Hitler might want banned in situations like that. That's a real book ban.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. They banned some books simply because they weren't in German. But when we talk about book bannings, especially as a Christian, we Christians, if we know our history, are very familiar with it. There used to be a list of banned books from a very super dominant kind of church. It was called the Index Librorum Prohibitum. It literally was the list of prohibited books.
Okay.
And so it was anything that would disagree with their specific worldview. So, and the people that suffered through that the most were primarily what we would call today evangelical Christians. They knew what book bans were. And then we have in our own history great heroes like William Tyndale, who was burned at the stake with his books, namely the Bible he had translated because he wanted the plowboy to be able to read it for himself.
Right.
Or you have a few centuries before that, or prior to that, you have John Huss, who was burned at the stake in Bohemia, surrounded by his books. That's a real book ban.
Yeah.
You look at other times where the famous painting of Martin Luther, who is basically standing up and saying that I can do no other, my conscience binds me. Mm-hmm. In the famous painting, his hand is pointing at a stack of books that were on the floor because the books were being banned. If anybody knows about book bannings, it is Christians.
For sure, that's true.
The opposite of what these people are calling book bannings is occurring today. And we know our history and we know how hypocritical that term is because we've actually lived through it. A book ban would be, for instance, anytime someone says that there is a book ban in the United States of America, you can type that book into your computer, go to Amazon, and buy it. It's not a book ban.
Okay.
So in essence, when we're talking about quote unquote book bans, this was an effort started by the American Library Association in about 1978 or so. And what it became, though, as the radical left took it over, was something that a professor years ago by the name of Daniel Borston. He wrote an entire book on this. He was a professor at University of Chicago, and he called it a pseudo-event. And he was trying to describe something that was happening, really kind of the Mad Men of Madison Avenue. You know, people that would get behind some big product and really try to push that product and make it famous all over the world.
Okay.
But sometimes they would create a pseudo-event. And what that meant was, this is not an actual event, but we're going to make it seem like an event until everybody believes it is an event.
Oh, wow.
And so one of the ways in which I've seen this described before, a pseudo-event, a guy named David Kadavi describes 4 characteristics of a pseudo-event. First of all, a pseudo-event is planned. It isn't spontaneous.
Okay.
People are not necessarily angry because they can't get a hold of pornography in schools. But people are trying to push a particular political agenda, and so they'll literally, the ALA, the American Library Association, will come along and call something a banned book event, and oftentimes then take those, quote, banned books and put them out in front of everybody and advertise them.
Oh, gotcha.
If it was a banned book, you can't advertise it.
Oh,
but this is a planned, not spontaneous event. This isn't a banned book. Secondly, pseudo events are created for the purpose of being reported.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's so
just make the news.
Right, exactly.
Right.
It's like a pseudo event, say back when Daniel Borston was creating this or coming up with this term. It would be where, say, someone with a has this very fancy purse, and they want everybody to buy the purse, and so they call this special press conference together, and they make it sound like everybody that is anybody is going to be at this press conference, and so they're introducing an event, an item. They're making it an event, but the only thing is, when you get there, they could have done the same thing by putting it in a store window. But by trying to make it something
bigger
special,
than it was,
right?
Okay,
it's created for the purpose of reporting.
So when we say, okay, there's some books that I've seen, you've seen,
yeah,
and it's like, okay, in my opinion, that is pornographic. Maybe it's cartoon drawings or whatever it is, but it's pornographic material.
Right.
And I would wish that book was not in our library.
Yeah.
If I would wish that and say, or try to say, we need to keep that out of the hands of kids, is that book banning? Is that what you're or is it a pseudo event? Or
it's not legally that it is a pseudo event.
They're trying to make it look like it is.
Yeah. So
okay.
So let me pull something up that talks just about this. When we talk about a banned books week, what we're looking at is what the ALA will describe to people as a, quote, banned book is something that is a challenged book. Normally when a parent will call a school or something like that and say, hey, I'm very concerned about this particular book. Could you guys review that?
Right.
Well, suddenly that reported book in their list becomes a banned book because a parent was concerned about it.
Okay.
Now that's how that they're reporting this in the banned books week. When you get into drill into the numbers of how many books are actually being banned, let me see here. Because they've tried to paint themselves as the rescuers of civilization.
Oh, I see.
As though we're all trying to burn down the Library of Alexandria.
Okay.
It's just kind of silly.
Wow.
But whenever they talk about this, Nicole Chavez, writing for CNN, tells us that book bans in public schools rose by 33% last academic school year. Now, that sounds really bad. But, and then this is just continuing with her quote. She writes this, many efforts targeting titles perceived as, and they put these scare quotes around it, sexual or scare quotes, inappropriate. But here's the interesting thing. These literally are highly graphic, sexual, and truly inappropriate. You don't put quote marks around that. Anybody who's actually looking at it would say, yeah, that's sexual and that's very inappropriate.
I see what you're saying, though. They're taking this and turning it on the person. Like if I come up and say, hey, this book, not only do I want to opt out my child from this book, but this shouldn't even be in the library.
Yeah.
Then they'll make a big deal. Okay, they're trying to ban a book. Yeah. I've actually seen this happen, and I didn't realize all this is behind it.
Yeah.
Go ahead and finish your thought here. I'm going to go to one more thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll weigh into that.
Okay.
So what they talk about is they tracked the ALA, supposedly, they tracked 3,000 instances in 33 states saying that there were these objective or these books that were being objected to, mind you, by parents. Okay, and so when we take a closer look into this, it means that every time, this is from the article, every time any parent suggested that a single book might be inappropriate, they declared that is declared to be an effort to, quote, ban a book.
I'll be darned. Wow. Yeah.
And we're told that in Florida, they had the highest number of, quote unquote, book bans. Mind you, now that's an appropriate quotation mark, because that's not a book ban. That's someone saying, hey,
I'm concerned about this.
I'm concerned about this.
Sure.
Yeah. That Florida had the highest number at 1,400, quote unquote, bans. That's about half, by the way. And we're told that more than any other state, Texas, which had the most bans last year, quote bans, last year had the second highest number this year with 625 instances. In every one of these, they're not actually banned. These are parents having a concern.
Just bringing it up. Yeah.
Right. So this is, by definition, a pseudo event.
Yes.
It's not even related to reality.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, the fact of the matter, okay, so here's what I like about this policy. And I'm going to say the name of the policy again. It's Laramie County School District 1. It's Chapter 7, Section 21, Draft Library Policy. So it's a draft right now. It's not a policy. It's a proposal. Instead of opting kids out of a certain book, you are having to say, I want to opt in. Now, here's what I like about this. One of the things I like about it is that now parents should be curious and go, well, what am I opting them into?
Right.
And maybe this will give some exposure to some of the books that we've seen that we know they're in these libraries.
Right.
And some of this stuff, the content of this is just, this should not be in the hands of kids.
Right.
Youth, I mean, it's like, and so what they've done, I think a brilliant thing, they said, okay, we're just going to put the opting in means we're going to give the power to the parent, and you guys can choose. You can completely opt your kid in and say no access to materials containing sexual content, or you can have a limited content, or you can have all content, open access, or finally no access. And so that's the brilliance, I think, of this, and it stays away from even the terms of book banning.
Right.
But what it's going to do, I think, it wouldn't be, as a parent, I'd be, well, what am I opting in? Show me that book. Right. What are you talking about there? And when you see it, I think most reasonable people would say, okay, that's not appropriate for this age of child, a young person. Now, the thing that's interesting, as this continues to go on, I'm not going to read it all, but they do have a place in here where they have an article that says they can. There's a way to bring books up to say for review, and apparently, this is what I understand. You can weigh in on this one. Apparently, the interim superintendent or the new superintendent, whatever that role, whatever the title is right now,
interim for now,
is interim, is actually working on a way to process those. Which I thought that's a positive thing. It seems to me.
It is.
Do you want to weigh in on that part?
I think so. Yeah. So what I appreciate, first, top line messaging is this, that they are making sure the parents are empowered in the entire process. So all four of those have parental involvement.
Right.
And that's really good. Rather than a parent being told that the best thing in the world is to turn your children over to a government employee.
Trust us,
It's so much better for you to understand that this is a partnership.
You bet.
These are your kids. So, yeah, you're right. So you have those four options, and then secondly, when it comes time, if you do see something that maybe should be placed on that parented limited access list, then you can actually, there's a mechanism that's being talked about, so that you can do that. And you're right. I've heard some people complain, a little bit, and in some of it I get. One person actually on one end said, "Oh, you know what? This is too convoluted. We should just make them all opt in." Rather than, and I get that argument. And then other people are saying, no, there shouldn't be, it should be opt out only. And so one of the things you come to the conclusion of is there's no way to please everyone at the same time.
Right.
But I think that they've worked really hard. And this is an effort that actually began before the last election for school board members, as a lot of people across the community for the last number of years have been saying, something's wrong. We know something's wrong. And then as people grew aware of the issue, they wound up electing at least 3 individuals that were very keen on joining at least 2 others who were wanting to make sure parents were empowered in this process.
Right. That to me is the brilliance of this whole thing,
Right.
because then parents at least have some kind of control or awareness,
Right.
and so they can at least talk about these things with the kids. And what I'm going to say it again. I want these parents to open these books up.
Right.
It's like, don't take my word for it. They probably think, okay, you're a preacher, so you probably think, it's like, no, this is not appropriate material. Yeah. Now, here's something I've heard, because I get on my soapbox every once in a while. It's like, well, yeah, but you know that kids have access to this on their phone, so why are you even worried about it in the library? I'll give you my answer, and I know you'll have a better one.
Go ahead.
But it's like, the library is a school public place. Yeah. We put a lot of stock in our, as a kid, you have, your teachers were your heroes.
Right.
And if in your library, and you trusted in your library, this is something we trust. And there's not a filter. And as an adult, I have a better filter. Right. I realize that, I need to have some filters. The kids are saying, well, this is what the library says. And so there's an authority placed on our school system that book maybe, or in that content might be even weightier in that, coming from that library, public, or not public, the school library, than you find something on the internet or something. It's like, well, yeah, but I know that's out of bounds. I shouldn't be looking at this. This is like, this school says it's okay.
Right.
That's my answer. Do you have a thought on this?
I think you're right. Definitely. The way we phrase it, so Wyoming Family Alliance, we put together a video on this very subject about a month and a half ago, and it's had massive impact.
Good.
But one of the things we talked about was a library has, for a long time, by parents at least, been considered a safe space.
Sure.
You could drop your children off and have a reasonable expectation that if the child stayed in a children's section, normally with their parent, that they weren't going to be running into sexually explicit material that was inappropriate for a child.
Very good.
And yet, over the last, and really since about 2007, you see it begin to accelerate, where the American Library Association has multiple awards, one of which is called the Stonewall Award, which is a massive award for people who put out LGBTQ plus all the other things, to produce more and more content for children.
Right.
And so you look at this concerted effort, and parents, as they see this playing out, they're thinking this is something that needs to be addressed. And so what should have been a safe space,
right.
And by many people, on the left, they want safe spaces for people, but they've eliminated a safe space for children and for families.
Oh,
that's
good.
A major problem.
I knew your answer would be better. Anyway, I like it.
No.
I like your answer a lot. And that's right. We do need to have those safe spaces. But I would say I really want parents, they need, these books that we're talking about, they try to show these in school boards across this land, right? And they get ejected because it's like, no, you can't read that, or you can't show that here. It's like, well, why is it in our library?
Right.
Where does the logic come through on that?
The illogic of that. So you're spot on. When you have a parent who is reading a book in a public meeting,
right?
Why then would that book be squelched in a public meeting? Well, it's because a child may potentially be listening to that.
Well, yeah.
Exactly. So why then would we let them read that?
Why do we let them?
So, and I think the vast majority of Americans, this is the reason why this has become such a visceral reaction from so many Americans today. It's because they know in their heart that this is wrong. This is not right.
Yeah.
This is where a certain group with undermining people with this, quote, pseudo event, they're doing this, and it needs to be stopped.
Right.
And so,
well, and the one thing, and I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of people watching, what Family Alliance is doing, what you're doing in Wyoming, and you're seeing a lot of interest. I think people are waking up.
Yes.
And I think we've been snoozing a little bit here at the wheel.
Right.
At some of this, just parents even, it'll be fine. It's probably fine. It's like they have slipped in things. Parents, you got to wake up. You got to go. You need to look at this stuff yourself, and you need to make sure that you opt in on this and say, wait, you look at the material and say, yep, that's fine, or nope, not access to this book.
Right.
And they're giving you an option to have this power, and the school board, I think, Nathan, I'm going to just say, I think the school board needs needs your support. You need to go online, and I would like for you to show us how to get there, and just say, hey, I support the opt-in policy, or I support it's actually called Chapter 7, Section 21, library policy, and just say that in general, and then I actually went through and typed a little note to each school board member saying, hey, I support the opt-in policy, and I appreciate your attempt to preserve the innocence of children.
Right.
And I had several of them fire back, say, hey, thanks for your support.
That's good.
So it's meaning something to them.
That's right.
All right, so you've got it right in front of you. Tell people how to get there.
Well, so the website is laramie1.org.
Okay.
Another thing, in your browser, you can simply type in Laramie County School District number 1,
okay,
and you'll get there, laramie1.org. On the front page, you have, if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see 3 things right together. You'll see a place where there's a board of trustees. You can look at documents and everything else. Next to that is a navy blue box, and it says Public Comment on Chapter 7, Section 21, Draft Library Policy. And it's very simple to fill out. You need to put your name in there, and then they will ask if you're an actual Cheyenne resident.
Okay.
And so that's a good thing. Make sure that you don't have people from Germany typing it. And so just fill that out. That is really good, and express your support for the opt-in policy. And there's a lot more details there. But if you want to actually read the policy you and I have been looking at today, click on that Board of Trustees document there, or the little box. And then it, sadly, and if anyone from the board is listening, it is a little convoluted for people to get here.
Yeah.
But if you click on, right up at the top, it says Meeting Information on the Board Docs website. If you click on it, it says Board Docs. You click through, and when you get there, it takes a little while for everything to load. You can look at, on the right, there's documents. The one that we're looking at today is the 2023 September 26 legal notice, a 45-day review, board policy, Chapter 7, Section 21. Click on that, and even as you click on that,
it's hard to find. I mean, you have to look through this thing to find it.
So it isn't the easiest, but there is a document down toward the bottom of that page.
I know. Then you have to click another thing.
Yeah, when you scroll over it, you'll finally get to it.
Yeah, that could be easier to access, but I hope we've unpacked it enough.
Yes, I think.
But also, I just saw there all the faces of the school board, and they have their email right underneath it.
Yeah.
And what I did is I just clicked on each one of those and just said, "Hey, fired them off.
Yeah.
Hey, I support this. Thanks for your stance for innocence of children."
Right.
And I said, put my name. So here's what I think. I think that we need to wake up, but I also think that we need to be courageous, because I know sometimes we're afraid, we want to be out there. Listen, the school board, there's a group of them that are standing strong, being very courageous.
That's right.
And I've talked to a couple of them too, and they're taking some arrows.
Right.
The church needs to step up.
That's right.
And we need to stand with them and say, hey, we're with you, proud of you, hang in there. And this is a good policy. It's not. I mean, somebody on the other side of this, that disagrees. It's like, well, all we're doing is giving it the power into the parents. I don't understand how anybody could not care for that. But anyway,
there's a couple things too. One thing, as you look at these people's names and as you email them, one wonderful thing to do is to pray for them too.
Yeah,
they need our prayer.
Yeah.
And even if they're in opposition to us, we're supposed to be a person that prays for them who are in leadership. But the other thing too, the overarching message at the end of the day is this: the public square is supposed to be a neutral space. We know that to be true, right? We're many times we're told you can't just go and start proselytizing on the campus of the school. So it's supposed to be a neutral space. And so whenever you find a group that acts outraged, that we will not accept them pushing their worldview on us in the public square, we still have the opportunity to reach back and say, well, I thought this was supposed to be a neutral space.
Right. That's a good point.
And so the exact opposite is true, though, if they are having the opportunity to push their ideas. And so when we look at this, I believe that this actually is good for all sides on this subject.
I agree.
This is a very carefully thought out path, and I think that we should support it.
I want to say one final thing, and then we'll close. But also in that, when you get in that public square, As a Christian, there's sometimes that Christians speak and it's like, okay, I agree with that person, but I would never say it like that, right? Or with that tone or whatever. It's like, listen, those of you that, if you don't get so amped on this, just get in the public square, speak truth in love. That's our instruction to all things. And just say, this is what I believe. I believe in this policy. I stand with this policy. And that's really all we need to do. We don't need to be amped. I think we just need to be united.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be courageous.
Speak the truth in love.
There you go. So as you leave, I'm going to challenge you. We've said this every time we leave here. In this particular issue, I believe that we need to step up and we need to be strong and very courageous. God bless you guys.